seeking help with any of these issues that we mentioned tonight. I'm with Dr. Mark Glafke, and he is a psychologist, and he helps discerners. That's what he does. So
Yes.
he is here to talk with you tonight. So I'm so thankful for you, Dr. Glafke, to join us. Please introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Rhonda, for the invite, for the opportunity to be here. So I became a Catholic psychologist through a very winding route. I'm practice in Lafayette, Indiana, but did not start here. I took the opposite route. Usually most people go from the Midwest to California, but I grew up in California and came out to the Midwest. I had no intention of studying psychology. I had no intention of going to graduate school coming out of my undergraduate. But God has a sense of humor. Started out, maybe some of you could relate. You are at a place where you would never imagined a few years ago. For me, it's a lot longer than a few years ago, but I started out wanting to be a baseball broadcaster. And by the time I graduated, knew I didn't know what I was going to do when I graduated. Thought my vocation, at that point was going to be marriage. And the relationship I was in did not work out. So I felt kind of lost and floundering and was really disconnected from faith, actually. It was a pretty dark time. But I had to ask myself as a cradle Catholic, do I really believe what I believe? And it led me to, God is wonderful, led me to some people in my parish. We got involved in a Bible study and then started questioning, okay, what do I really want to do with my life? And my first thought was, I want to make beer. I was making beer at home with a friend. I thought we could do this as a business and a career.
So maybe monk was like, I don't know, being a monk, back then, that might have been a thing.
If that would have been pitched to me then, that would have been really appealing. I might have ended up there, but I actually wanted to really know it. And I went to, there was a graduate program at a school in California that you could actually study masters in brewing science.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know biology, chemistry. So I went back to school as kind of a non-traditional student taking these biochem classes and organic chemistry, and I was loving them. And I thought, you know what, my classmates actually were in health sciences, medicine, nursing, things like that. And as I was getting more connected to my faith, I had this draw towards helping people in a different way, and so I really started to move away from that and thought, I want to help people. Thought about medicine. I just had to be honest with myself. I'm way too squeamish with blood and guts, and that wasn't going to be it. But I took some counseling classes related to psychology, and they really intrigued me, even though they weren't from a Catholic perspective. Just there were some truths, I think, about the human person that really spoke to me. And I started taking more. And then that one thing led to another. I ended up in taking graduate classes at a local university, and then started applying to doctoral programs, and ended up at Purdue University. But I was still had moments where I wasn't certain about finishing that degree because I felt a call towards priesthood, and almost left graduate school for that. Came really close. I already had told friends and family I was going, broke up with my girlfriend at the time because my spiritual director was convinced I was called to be a priest, and I agreed with him. I listened to him, but I was just not happy for the next 3 months, and just was, struggling to eat and be excited. So I could relate to any of you that have had that type of turmoil. And then I came to him one day and I just said, I don't think I can do this. I don't feel at peace. And I thought he was going to be really disappointed. And he looked at me and he kind of smiled and he goes, all right, well, good. And I really wanted to come over the table and just almost strangle him. I love him to death, but I was like, I just flipped it upside down to pursue this. Now what? But it was a great gift. It was actually one of the best things that happened in terms of it was painful, but I needed it because I always felt I had to be moving in a particular direction, had to be married, had to be a priest, but I never really had time to just be.
Mm-hmm.
and really appreciate, okay, what, like, the relationships that I had around me, my parish, my friends, I was always feeling dissatisfied, had to be doing something else. And it was from that place that I think my vocational path really became clear, and ended up meeting my wife several months later when I was not looking for a relationship.
That's when it happens.
Yeah, I didn't feel pressured to be in it or out of it. And so I think I could actually like look at it, examine it, get to know her. And there was a great freedom that I had not had before in dating relationships or, considering a religious life. So from a lot of those experiences, a lot of the pain, a lot of the embarrassment, a lot of the joy, as I became a psychologist and opened up my private practice, I really wanted to, if I could in some ways, help those that were in a similar position, struggling to discern. But then once they had discerned a path, helping them to figure out what's going on in their life that's preventing them from being really happy, to really strive for holiness, and that is really getting in the way to live out those two great commandments, loving God with our whole heart, mind, and soul, and our neighbor as ourself. It's that last part, loving ourselves, that really can be the most difficult. I'm also finding that really truly believing, not just up here intellectually, but like in the heart at a bones level, that God is that loving Father that just delights that I'm his son, or that, you're his daughter. For a lot of us, it's an intellectual or theoretical concept, but it's really hard for us to relate on a natural or human level. We may have lacked that confidence in our parental relationships, with friends, with a mentor, and that really impacts our ability, I think, to not just enjoy our vocations, but actually be heroic at it, as someone who's married, or someone who's in a monastery, a convent, a rectory, as a diocesan priest.
So I think it's harder and harder as our society is breaking down and the family's breaking down in so many ways, for us who have men who are well adjusted, completely well adjusted. First of all, probably, many of us are completely well adjusted. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want anybody to think that you have to be 100% well adjusted to think about being a priest or a religious brother. Okay. So that's not it. I'm not saying it perfect. Right. Okay. Jesus was the only perfect one. Hello. It does make it difficult that our families are struggling so much and without buying a house so many times. So you've identified a few of the issues that keep coming up to you while you assessing men for diocesan priesthood or for religious life. So that's what we're going to focus on right now. We're going to focus on these two big issues. And you've been assessing now, I think we didn't discuss this. You've been assessing now men going into seminary religious for quite a few years.
Correct. Really started to delve into it about 9 years ago, almost 10 years ago now. And started with a handful, that first year. And now kind of on average around 30, at least 30 people per academic year. And so it's given me a great opportunity to see a wide array of backgrounds and individuals, but there's a lot of consistencies in some of the key things that the candidates are really struggling with going into. And this is from people who come from families of divorce, from broken families, from intact families that you see on Sunday. You go to Mass and you see that large family and they look like they've got all of their stuff together. And it's one of the children from that family who, like, you hear their story and you realize things aren't as they seem on the exterior. Doesn't mean there's anything like abusive that could be reported to child protective services. They're not being hit, they're not being neglected. But there's various forms of neglect, there's various forms of pressure that we experience with our family of origins that we're not even aware sometimes that affect us. Or we think like I'm someone, my parents divorced when I was young. I was fortunate, both my parents seemed to really act towards me in a very loving way, but, and I thought I was pretty fortunate. I kind of came out of it unscathed. My parents were initially very contentious for the first couple of years, but that really dissipated and they were cooperative, which helps. But I found out later that the divorce had affected me in a way I had not even realized in terms of, we grow up with a basic assumption that our parents, they remain married, they protect us, they take care of us. Those are basic assumptions. And when those get shattered by divorce or abuse or an early death of a parent, for example, at least at a subconscious level and sometimes a conscious level, it really disrupts us because we relied upon that not changing. So if that got blown apart, what else in my life may get blown apart when I least expect it? And so for me, the way that transpired was really an insecurity of the even established relationships or friendships that I have, something would go wrong.
Yeah.
Like almost like, and self-doubt, like, why are they, even in interactions, like looking for signs that they were disappointed or bored. And it would affect me emotionally, but I would just think it was a valid issue when a lot of times I was just, I was reading into things that were not there. And it's very humbling and sobering when you find out later as an adult, like, oh, that's been happening a lot. And it's because I really doubted that my father wanted to be there or, the world would change. And so something like that is very powerful. And I realized how it was also affecting how I experienced God the Father. It's hard for me to pray to him because I didn't really believe that he was really closely connected with me or cared about, cared to count every hair in my head or things like that we hear in scripture. And so those are very, like, in today's world, those don't seem that drastic. That seems pretty commonplace, divorce. But think of all the other things that people listening right now have been experiencing in their lives, and rejection from peers, all kinds of insecurities that develop because you might have been ostracized, or you may have just developed your own self-doubt in looking at yourself compared to others. Traumatic things can happen. Illnesses that have affected things that you were able to do. I know some people have applied for religious life I've worked with, had early childhood illnesses that prevented them from doing a lot of activities their peers were doing. Because they didn't want to be a further risk for, like, asthma or, heart conditions, you name it. And it's devastating to them because they feel limited in what they can do in their lives. And it affects their self-identity and really their trust in God. So these are like very deep things that don't just jump out on the page right away if you ask somebody about their life. You have to really dig in through various questions and assessment measures, and you can get to that information and help people reveal really the source of a lot of insecurities. And one of those main ones that come up, you and I've talked about, Rhonda, is a real struggle to develop close relationships. I'm really stunned by the degree or lack of comfort with particularly with men, young men. And I don't mean like men that are just coming out of high school, like men are 25, 26. When I ask them who their best friend is, they name their mother. And I'm really glad they feel they have a close relationship with their mother, but you've had a lot of life experience to develop really strong bonds with other male peers. And we need those. I mean, we need those for healthy development because God created us as relational beings. I mean, we're made in his image. He's Father, Son, Holy Spirit. He's relational by definition.
Right.
So we're our fullest live out our fullest sense of who we're created by giving love, showing love and receiving love through self-sacrifice, through presence, through laughter and play and, appropriate affection. And do we need that? I mean, we only need God, but boy, does it help. It helps when on a natural human earthly level, we experience a direct experience of being loved and that we matter unconditionally. Trust that even if I have a conflict with my friend or my parent or my family member, they still love me. That helps us to really work against any doubts we might have that that's also not applicable to God the Father, God the Son, or the Holy Spirit. And it's kind of a newer area of work within Catholic psychology is looking at those relationships and how we relate to God, not just intellectually, but on a behavioral level. And those types of insecurities and loneliness results in all kinds of other psychological issues. Those individuals are less likely to handle stress well because they have to keep things to themselves. They don't feel like they have support people they can process that with. So they either hold on to it and it causes other issues, physical issues, or escape issues like unhealthy behaviors, pornography, and masturbation. And I think that a lot of the roots of those particular issues are involved with that, like their compensation for a sense of frustration with life, not feeling fulfilled. And I see this in people who are not only like considering religious life, who are in it. I mean, they're ordained and they're still wrestling with those issues. And they felt that the vocation itself would make them happy and give them identity and take care of it. Just like a lot of people enter a marriage and think like, yeah, I've had some problems with my fiance, but once those vows are said, that's going to take care of all that. We'll be patient, we'll be understanding, we'll be self-sacrificial, we'll just,
or he will complete me.
Yes.
And and I think that he will complete me is the same kind of thing for he says all of my issues are going to be fixed once I give myself to God.
Right.
And I think still some work to be done for us. I mean, product of divorce here myself, and in my marriage, my husband didn't come, meaning he wasn't going to fix those issues that had come from having a broken house. So I think that men and need to figure out, you're talking about having healthy relationships with other men particularly, and that can take saying peers, like father, or you have a peer group. If you don't have a peer group that you can regularly talk with, be honest with, that's going to be hard to, what do you say, to do?
Well, and part of that, not having that peer group or the friend group, is also a symptom of, and so we want something of also that's very problematic. So it isn't just that I'm encouraging you just to have friends, like there's different degrees of friendships. And I think a lot of us have really good friends that we encounter like in, study groups, Catholic ministries, like focus missionaries. You might be an alum and you have friends through that and you have that great common experience. But how many of those individuals do you have that deeper level, that virtuous relationship where you can really trust that you desire the good of that person and they trust that in you likewise? But if we're struggling to have those experiences in life, it's a symptom that in general, we're probably afraid to be authentically ourselves. Because if we are, then we might risk rejection or misunderstanding. And I don't mean, okay, be who you are kind of from the secular standpoint of like, whatever I'm thinking or feeling is the most important thing ever. No, I'm talking about just simple, basic, like freedom to share a reaction to something that is rooted in truth and is not intended to hurt anybody, but it's just to sort of reveal, kind of here's where I'm at, and kind of explore that with somebody you trust, like share an opinion, share a thought. How are you feeling today? Not feeling you always have to say, I'm great, I'm fine, but maybe able to say, you know what? Today's been brutal. I've really been discouraged today in my vocation and just in life. But you know what? I've also been blessed that, just when I wanted to like cancel all of my, whenever I'd scheduled the rest of the day, a friend called me and it was really just great to talk. And it reminded me, that I am loved because I was just doubting. So you're not overwhelming somebody, but you're being honest with them. And for some of us, we would rather, run a marathon than do something like that, even if you've never run a marathon, which could kill you. But, I reference this a lot as a reason why for Americans, the number one fear amongst us is like public speaking above physical death. It really illustrates, it's like, well, why is that so scary? Well, it's because even with a room full of people they've never even met and may never ever see again, I can't tolerate looking out that they may reject me. I would rather physically die so I could avoid all that. And it's really irrational, but that is really operative, I think, for most of us at school, at work, in our parishes. And we can feel comfortable having a common activity, like we can be altar servers and we feel comfortable like, following procedure, but like outside of that, am I actually able to enter into the other person's life and likewise allow them in by just getting to know my fullest of my personality? Most of us don't falsely represent ourselves, but we tend to just give like a small portion of what like the fullness of like, your personality, your skills, your gifts, your thoughts, your reactions, and your feelings. And that's another area I would say that like a lot of the seminary candidates are really struggling with coming in, is like just emotions. I mean, a lot of families do not model well how to process and handle emotions. They try and keep that suppressed. It's kind of treated like cancer or COVID now. It's like you got to keep a mask on and keep it all in so you don't infect others when you're not intending to hurt anybody. And there is a point where, yes, it's too much, but some people just can't even get that out. And if that's the case, you're going to experience all kinds of other problems. So you have to tread very lightly. You don't have the freedom of movement. It's like kind of walking a tightrope because you can never do anything that triggers emotional discomfort. So, yeah, in some ways it sounds weird, but I work with a lot of men to develop a freedom to fail. Because and failure is a big word. It's very relative and subjective, but freedom for things not to work out the way you intend or plan, and having that be okay. But you can only really do that if you have a secure sense that you matter to somebody. I think particularly that's where initially comes from our family, but what gets in the way of me believing that with God? And I struggled with that for years. I mean, I'm still working on it in terms of seeing him as not just somebody who's distant and tolerates me, or will only be pleased when I do something amazing, or don't create, or avoid a list of mistakes, but that, he's excited about me being happy now and eternally. He's willing to let me experience some difficult things because it's probably good for me to learn and to develop confidence in myself to handle adversity.
Because there's going to be plenty of adversity when somebody's ordained. Mm-hmm. Adversity doesn't stop when you have Father in front of your name. I would think that actually fold gets harder. Mm-hmm. And that is because in some ways you're in a bowl. at the parish, and everything's going through you. Everybody it looks to you, and you're the for that they look to for guidance. Because I see this all the time, that there's not a lot of building up of priests.
Right.
There's a tearing down. And so as a lay person, my job around the country speaking to laity is like, hello, can we stop that? Can we stop telling our priests right after the ceremony of how long it was, or how they should have done something differently, or whatever may be the case. So we need men going into seminary or religious life who are strong themselves, but can have an outward relationship enough that somebody says something that they may internalize and say, oh gosh, they meant to hurt me with that, versus probably have their own issue going on. You know what, to not to disassociate that a little bit, to say it's probably not me that's the issue. But we need healthy men for sure, and that takes work, right? And that's where it is not necessarily overnight. This could be years process to do it well. It is years process, right?
Yeah, and it should. And I think I want to not frighten everyone that again, we expect people entering to struggle with these issues, in terms of relationality or emotion to some degree. But I don't know if I can stress enough how significant some of the deficits that I've been seeing. And 9 years ago, what I would have expected to see developmentally from an 18-year-old coming out of high school who's still developing a sense of identity and learning how to navigate relationships and become mature, that your average 25-year-old is looking like your 18-year-old looked like then. And I thought, okay, maybe I'm just being really stringent in what I'm seeing, but I'm connected with a larger group of Catholic psychologists who complete similar work in terms of assessment and are lecturers at seminaries. And they're saying the same thing. And it's like, it's pretty pervasive regardless of where in the country or where in the world. Cause we have men and women coming in for assessments from different continents actually. And you're seeing some similar issues. One of those is the difficulty with handling criticism. It's never easy to handle criticism, but it's become increasingly difficult because in the educational systems, like philosophy and collegial dialogue went out the window a long time ago. Like we're not trained to have debates based on logic and reason. I think that's kind of one of the reasons why we can't figure out if someone's a male or female, supposedly. But to have different opinions and be able to discuss that is actually a way of developing relationality if you can stay committed to the good of the other person, which is very Christ-like. I love this person. I can tolerate that we disagree, but being able to share opinions. And for some people, they can't handle that. And that's why people get so disrupted on social media. And we confuse acceptance of self with agreeing with my opinions. And when you're in religious life, you're going to get people disagreeing with you constantly, but also in formation, you're being evaluated all the time. My heart goes out to everyone in that. You're under a microscope. But it can be freeing too. If you can become adjusted to that, you're ready for your particular judgment. You're open to just being transparent, and you don't feel threatened by what can be seen, because nobody's opinion matters more than our Lord's, but thankfully he's all merciful as well as all just. But like Rhonda was saying, there's so much pressure that's going to occur after ordination, even before it, but it's not only about you being healthy because of your own thoughts and behaviors, but you're having to take on, whether you like it or not, everybody else's psychological woundedness who are looking for someone to love them and replace their parents. And you can't, that's not a burden you can shoulder. No one can. But it's like, what do I do when this happens? Because if you're somebody that needs to fix everything and somebody comes to you in tears and you can't fix it, that can be really disruptive to you, and you feel all kinds of unjustified guilt when all you're really being called to do is just be present with them. Can you tolerate not fixing a situation? Some people can't based upon their personality. It's really, really disruptive to them. So that's something important to know. You can work on that.
Well, especially if they're going to be sitting in confession.
Yep, absolutely.
Like, because first of all, you're not the one who's fixing. You're in persona Christi there, you're listening and just giving the best advice that God can give you, working through the Holy Spirit. And then you got the people who keep coming back. Mm-hmm. You're like, Sally, you've been back 10 times saying the same thing. Obviously, I'm not doing a good enough job. Mm-hmm. Right, then that can get on you, like as I can imagine the sense of disappointment or feeling of failure, and so you need them to work through this prior to. So what are some resolutions through the men can do on both of these main issues that you're talking about?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of them is, and a lot of you are probably already doing this, but is engaging in some self-reflection. And I recommend journaling specifically because it's private. And you can pick, the place and time where you feel most comfortable, whether it's, at home, in your room, at an office, in an adoration chapel. But really targeting, okay, what are the aspects about myself? What am I most insecure about that I'm really afraid to share with others? And that doesn't mean that you have to go out and share those things immediately, but like that's tremendously helpful information for you to know, so you can begin to address it in ways of like providing it first, just some like acceptance that it's there, because there can be just a lot of shame and guilt that I even wrestle with it. Like I'll tell myself I shouldn't have this doubt, I shouldn't be afraid of talking to new people. And it's hard to be really honest in our journaling. And I think I always recommend taking 2 or 3 passes at every topic that you're addressing. Like start with your initial reaction and then ask yourself, okay, is there more there? Is there something that I'm really struggling to really acknowledge? And I usually challenge myself, like if I have to answer this in the most uncensored way possible, what would I put down? And sometimes you come up with some ugly things, and we don't want to acknowledge that that's kicking around inside of us. But you can't heal it, you can't attack it if you're not honest with what that is. What would be an example of that? It might be you're frustrated with a friend of yours, and you're aware that you're frustrated, and you have some reasons why you think maybe they're at fault. But if you really look at, trying to ask yourself, well, how am I contributing to this? Or what is this really triggering? Why am I so angry? Is there something more that I'm feeling in terms of fear or loss or doubt or anger? You might come up with some things like, I'm afraid that like I need this person in my life. If they're not in my life, I'll feel like no one else cares about me. If I'm identifying the level of anger I have, maybe it isn't just that I'm simply frustrated, maybe I can realize I'm actually wishing them harm in some way. I really hope that, they have some disappointing experiences. Boy, is that really painful to acknowledge. But if I don't, I might use some defense mechanisms unconsciously to kind of rationalize that that's okay and focus on, the splinter in their eye and not on the plank on my own. But if it's social anxiety and I figure out, the things that I'm really worried about, taking those to others that, ask them that you trust, maybe give you some feedback about how they experience you and how they would encourage you to try and approach that. And they might be a support system, say, okay, let's set a goal. Like, I want you to reach out and contact somebody that you already know, but maybe you've fallen out of contact with, and just see where that goes. that can be amazingly risky and scary, but can be amazingly profitable, even if the other person thinks you're crazy for randomly calling them. Like, you at least did it, but it may not have gone as bad as you thought it did. And who knows, they might be overwhelmed that you were so intentional. Like, and you could have changed their day, and you might actually start or rekindle a relationship. But honest journaling can lead you to in all kinds of directions. I always ask for prayer, for help and prayer. Holy Spirit, guide me. The saints that I'm particularly have affinity for, whether it be the Blessed Mother or Saint Padre Pio or Saint Anthony, who's behind me. I don't know if you can see it. There he is.
Yes.
He's my guy in terms of, not just finding things, but that John Paul II, which actually brings up another issue, which is about fatherhood. And that's something that we're all, I think, really suffering from at various levels in the church, in our domestic church, in our homes. And the men, I think, who have a lot of these issues, insecurity, self-doubt, all of them all struggle with some level of doubt within our fatherly relationships. If we even had them, some of us did not. And that impact is really important. It's not to diminish the impact of a mother. The mother has another particular impact that is irreplaceable. But yeah, anyone who's really struggling, I think, believing that God loves them, has some level of deficit with their own fathers. But that self-reflection is extremely important. Asking others for feedback, how they experience you or what they would, because people will see you in a much more positive light than you see you.
Yes.
Yep.
But that's hard. It's hard to process that, as Rhonda Gruenewald, it's hard to process that, let alone anybody trying to enter seminary, to think, because again, you're in a way, when you enter seminary, then you're again in a fishbowl.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm only in a, nobody's evaluating me, Mike and my husband, but you know what I'm saying? Like, there's
Right.
no grading happening.
Yep.
So it's very, very challenging. What about the mentor? What is, if they don't have a father figure, mentor, and the mentor and spiritual director, probably not the same person, right?
Correct. You would hope that the spiritual director approaches the directee as a mentor, but there are some boundaries in terms of like the amount of contact that they will be able to have, and just outside, of the direction itself. But sometimes through spiritual direction, you can develop the motivation and courage to, develop other relationships. And it might be someone at the seminary or someone in the religious order that doesn't serve that role, maybe directly as a formator or as a spiritual director, that, you can develop a relationship. It's important for the younger men to develop a relationship with older men in general, or just older generations, to feel comfortable. But yeah, you'd really be surprised. I mean, it's very flattering for an older man to have a younger man approach him and just want to ask questions, get some guidance and direction. And if it's going to overburden the older individual, that's on them, but it does, again, you're taking a risk. It's like Christ asking you to go out into the deep. But all these are opportunities to develop confidence, freedom from anxieties, but really developing all kinds of different virtues, courage and perseverance and humility, by stepping out there. And they're not tests from God. God will be there with you. But it's easy to forget that in the moment, right? Because you're just, because your body takes over. It starts to, your heart starts to race, your muscles start to tense up, your breathing changes, you get queasy stomach, and that says, nope, I'm about to die here. Not just do something uncomfortable.
So I want to encourage the men to really explore this. I know a priest that really struggles with interaction with parishioners. Like, took him 3 years to say my name, and I'm always up at church. Like, you know, and there was no, like, he came in 2 minutes before mass and vested, got out there. He did what he was supposed to do. He gave great homilies. And then, like, he bolted. Like, if he shook a hand, that was like a good day. You know, I just, and you can, as a parishioner, that's all anybody would talk about. He doesn't look you in the eye. He's not relational. He doesn't. So deal with it now. I want you to deal with it now. I want you to deal with it now and know whether or not it's something that's going to really hinder your priesthood, because you do affect so many people. So it's not, I mean, that's just one issue, but I again, encourage all the men here just to dive deeper into whatever is causing you anxiety or depression or all the things, or really stress, causing a lot of stress, right? I would imagine that got to be able to deal with the stresses of the world if you're going to have to deal with a whole parish, being in charge of a whole parish of people.
And then unfortunately that, you know, leads to one of the primary issues that, you know, men are coming to me all the time struggling with, which is pornography and masturbation. Because that tends to be, it's not a core issue, it's a symptom. It's a symptom of some of these strong deficits of anxiety and self-doubt, frustration. And, you know, when I ask people what tends to be the precursor, do you notice any triggers before those, you engage in those behaviors, the number one response usually is, well, it comes stress. That's probably one. Boredom is number two. Well, it isn't just simply stress or boredom. That stress and boredom is connected with all those other experiences of not feeling fulfilled, feeling overwhelmed. It's really a lot of doubt and fear. And the pornography and masturbation is really a defense mechanism to pull us away from that. And it's important to conceptualize it that way. And we have responsibility over those actions, but it's not you. Like, it's not actually defining you. It's like, it's not that this like exists within you, like you're genetically predisposed, and it's there because you're an undisciplined soul, simply an undisciplined soul who doesn't love God. You know, it's more likely you're a soul that is desperately wanting to love God and feel loved by God. And because you're struggling to really internally believe that, those behaviors become an outlet to distract you momentarily from those experiences, even though they will result in guilt later. But also a way of expressing anger. Maybe at an unconscious level, it's like, hey, God, you're not taking care of me in terms of like, I mean, and I'm serving you. Like, I've told everybody I'm going to be a priest. And so what gives? Like, could you take away some of these struggles? Because I've agreed to be celibate and this is going to be a difficult life. Help me out. It can be a way of expressing anger, which is good to know. It's like you're telling yourself that there's some void and something that needs to be fulfilled. Well, what is that? The root of all that is love. It's doubt about being loved or feeling loved. That's why I emphasize those relationships with others. And the men that I work with that either don't struggle with pornography and masturbation or have been able to come out of it successfully, you know, really maintain ongoing abstinence and continence. All of them, you know, I guarantee you, they've developed healthy relationships, you know, close relationships they never imagined that they would have had. And they don't need to be around those individuals all the time, but just knowing they exist in that relationship is real and that they matter, that fills that void. And that gives them enough peace and relief from those attachments. They're not beating themselves up about it. So spiritually, they feel freer to really believe that God is, you know, embracing them and loving them and not disappointed in them. And he's not any of those. He's not disappointed in us. He's just he's disappointed for us because he knows that that's, we're being separate. We're being really imprisoned by something that's really unhealthy and preventing our growth. But I think really looking at them as defense mechanisms starts to reduce a lot of the shame for the men.
Mm-hmm.
And because, I mean, the devil piles on top because he hates all of you listening. It's all of us. It's like, because he wants you to be discouraged. He wants you to hate yourself. He wants you to doubt yourself that you can overcome any of this. Because if you are able to grow in it, you're going to have the freedom to really love others in heroic ways, change people's trajectories in their lives, help them believe that they're loved and that they matter. And that's so threatening to him. So he wants to take what's a naturally based issue, meaning like something that's developed throughout your life, doubts, and he gets in our ears and he piles on top of it and says, look, it's okay. Go ahead and do it this time. Or you might as well, because you're never going to be successful in this. Like, even if you get ordained, like you're not going to be that good. Like, and good luck pleasing God enough so that you get saved. Boy, does that breed such discouragement and in some cases despair.
So the ministry that you work with, that is soulsandhearts.com,
Mm-hmm.
do you have some vocational discernment tools there
Mm-hmm.
that would help men walking through this, maybe by themselves? Because we have discerners at all ranges here. We've got some men in this group that are just now thinking about this as a possibility. They're open to it, but they don't know where God's calling necessarily, to men who are in seminary right now, right, all the way. So the gamut. And so I want to offer them some, if this has been helpful, where do they go to find more? What is on at soulsandhearts.com that would be good for them?
Sure. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a relatively new venture. It's a website that was created at the beginning of this liturgical year. The first was released the first week of Advent, and Dr. Jerry Crete and Dr. Malinowski are the ones that developed this. I'm a contributor through writing blogs, and I have an online course with Dr. Crete that's specifically focused on those that are discerning their vocation, and also for those that are already, in the midst of their vocation, married, ordained, professed, and are struggling to really live it out and to really thrive in it. The title of the course is called "Be Called: Discerning and Living Out Your Vocation." And that's one of the resources on there. There's a variety of lessons that dig into, there's video presentations and worksheets to look at, areas in our life that might be driving depressive symptoms and ways to overcome them, anxiety, procrastination, attachment to substances, pornography and masturbation, overcoming that, looking at from a Catholic perspective, and just anxiety about finding God's will for those of you that are tortured about, like, God has chosen something for me. What happens if I don't choose what he's picked for me? And kind of like challenging you to look at that maybe in some different ways and to consider it. That can be, I think, more encouraging. Also, if you feel frozen, how to overcome that and build momentum to move towards your vocation if you felt like you've really stalled. Soulsandhearts.com also has a lot of content. There's blogs that you can read on a variety of subjects. Also some podcasts that go over the weekly mass readings and look at it from a Catholic perspective. And Dr. Crete and Dr. Malinowski, they're the ones featured on it. And they always come up with something to kind of challenge the listeners to apply to their own lives. And a lot of these things that we've talked about tonight, in terms of how we relate to ourselves, relate to others, relate to God, and tying that into Scripture. It was developed because so many people were coming and asking, like, I don't even know where to go to get information on, like, my brother or sister just revealed that they're struggling with pornography. What do I do? Like, where do I begin? They told me they want a therapist. They want a Catholic therapist. Where do I go? How do I look for one? What do I consider in looking one? And there's resources like that are free for you, and opportunity to join the forum there and ask questions anonymously or however you'd like.
So what do you, if there's a man watching and he's like, I probably need to jump in and maybe see a therapist more regularly to work through some of this before I apply.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that would be good.
Mm-hmm.
Where do they go to find that Catholic therapist? I think you'd mentioned, I know of a couple of organizations that you've mentioned
Mm-hmm.
when we were talking with the women.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, we've already had a whole hour discussion with the women, so don't think that it's only you, okay? Because the women have their own issues. Thank you very much. But anyway, so where would they go if they want to find a therapist?
The two main sources that I recommend is, first of all, there's a website which I don't have any affiliation with, but I really support because I use it all the time. People ask me for references from other parts of the country, is catholictherapists.com. So Catholic Therapists, plural, no spacing, all lowercase.com. And it has an easy user interface. You type in your state, your zip code, whatever, and you'll get some hits in terms of therapists that are nearby. Depending on where you're living, it may be 100 miles away, but the list is growing, it's developing. And what I like about the site is that it helps you really to kind of discern a little better who you're reaching out to, these complete strangers that you know nothing about. There's a bio that's very detailed in terms of they have to answer several questions related to how they approach the teachings, the magisterial teachings of the church. Do they attend mass? What's their therapeutic approach? If none of that makes any sense to you when you're reading it, at least it'll tell you like what types of issues they focus on. They're focusing on trauma, sexual attachments, marital issues. Some might even actually be specific, like we help people with vocational discernment and overcoming that. So good amount of information to pick from, and it's free. You don't have to pay anything. So win-win.
I know you've got one more, but I have a question. What are you finding that people are more doctors having therapeutic sessions online like this through Zoom?
Yes, I would say, well, particularly even before COVID hit, that was becoming much more readily available. There was some controversy with it. So that's something to consider too, is that the controversy is not that, whether or not it's necessarily safe. There's some issues related to, it's important to be nearby, I think, in somewhat physical proximity with your patients, not because you're going to go physically rescue them like an ambulance, but if they do need some emergency or crisis intervention, knowing the other resources that are available to them and knowing them well. So if you're referring them, you can give them a more informed referral. But some states, their licensure restrict the therapist to only work with individuals in the boundaries of their state, like actually physically present. So, so even a Zoom session, I'm in Indiana and somebody's in Michigan. If I'm not licensed in Michigan, according to the state of Indiana, that would actually be illegal. But a lot of therapists have actually kind of just said, well, there's other issues, or they kind of they interpret the laws a little bit differently. So there's a lot of debate even amongst the Catholic therapeutic community. But for some people, I think particularly with those in their 20s, early 30s, are much more comfortable with this medium and are actually more open to it, rather than some of my patients who are in their 40s or 50s are like, thanks, Dr. Glafke. I'll wait till I can come in person.
Yeah. But I would think that there would be, I don't know, there would be a level of, I can do this, tell you my things like this. But if I have to walk into your office and see you, that's a different level.
It is, and it goes both ways, because I have some patients who say, this makes me uncomfortable because I want to see you in three-dimensional space because I have a sense of how you're reacting, but I really want a better sense of what you're thinking or feeling. And so I'm like, okay, well, you can ask me, and it's my responsibility to be honest with my reaction to you. So it's scary either way, but yes.
So there was a second resource. So Catholic CatholicTherapists.com. And then what's the other one?
The other website is the Catholic Psychotherapy Association. I know it's a lot. If you look, they have a website, and I believe they have a member directory that I think you can search and just get the contact information on it. Now, it doesn't give as much detailed information as CatholicTherapist.com, but you might find some names around you that you can then Google search and get some more info on them, because there isn't a direct overlap.
Sure.
On the two. Like, I'm actually not listed on CatholicTherapist.com because so much of my work has been moving towards formation and seminarian assessments that I'm not able to take on new patients right now. And then there's actually
good to know, so that people, if they're searching for you because they want to work with you, it's not because of any other reason, but you're so busy with all of this, which we're thankful that there are Dr. Glafkes out there helping
and there's
men
more coming.
and women.
There's more coming. I'm available too. I mean, as best I can, even if I can't work with somebody, people often send me an email or a call, and they just want a little bit of direction or guidance, like, where can I go for this if I can't work with you? And I'm happy to answer those questions, because what I'm really concerned about is that, we're all on the same team. We're all brothers and sisters in Christ. And it's, that's really the thing that I'm really joyful about. And, like what you get to do, it's like, well, yeah, for me, this is a way I make my living, but I get to make my living, and, God provides what I need. But to be able to do it this particular way, I just feel very humbled and blessed. And then when in doubt, I mean, ask those in your community. More and more people are willing to admit to you that they've gone to counseling, because they're seeing it as a resource rather than as a stigma or something that they're embarrassed by. It's still there. I get that. That's why a lot of my patients, if they see me in mass, they don't want me to look directly at them unless I come up to them. They're like, don't don't show anybody that, or at least make it look like I'm your patient, unless I want to tell them. But ask your parish priest, ask people that for word of mouth referrals are probably one of the strongest sources, because at least then you're coming from people that and you trust, and your experience may not be the same as theirs, but that's, again, a vulnerable thing to ask or to explore, but there's value in that as well.
And I know that you are open to answering questions from the men in this discernment group as well. So if you're comfortable asking the question on this live post, then I'll pass it along to Dr. Glafke afterwards. If you would rather just message me, I'm just going to copy and paste it and put an email to Dr. Glafke. And I'll put Dr. Glafke's email address in case you want to just go directly to the source. And you have a small issue, or you just want direction, that, like he was saying, not to actually take you on as a client, then I'm happy to do that. And I'm going to be putting out a discount code for soulsandhearts.com so that you can access that course on discernment as well. So thank you, Dr. Glafke. I think this was really helpful. I hope it was. And I'm just thankful that that the church has doctors like you helping, because we need it in this crazy world that we're living in. And I want priests that are as well adjusted as possible coming out of seminary and Absolutely. Those entering in religious. So I'm very thankful for you, and thanks for spending your time with us.
My pleasure. It's been a joy too, and I'm also grateful for all of you that serving the church and choosing to live your life in a way that's going to benefit us all if you continue to grow. So we all win in that case. So thank you.
Amen. It's a win-win for the church.
Yes.
All right. God bless you.
All right. God bless you. Thank you, Rhonda.